Welcome back to another episode of Piercings Q&A, and we are today taking a bunch of questions about body piercings, and I'm doing my best to answer every single one as long as time's allotted. Well, my name is Scott Wilkinson. I'm a professional body piercer and been piercing since 1994, and right on the other side of the camera here is Jared. So the voice you're hearing is Jared speaking with us
Hi, everybody.
Today. What's going on, Jared? How are you doing today?
Not too much. I'm doing pretty good. Just getting ready to answer some questions.
That's right. Sorry we're running a little bit late today. We had a little bit of complications, technical difficulties, but we made it through and we're here. And I believe we're about ready to go, aren't we?
We are. So a good first question, because it's a question everyone always asks, and it's, how do I know when a piercing is healed? How do I know when I've reached that point?
Okay, so it is kind of a tricky question because a lot of times a piercer is going to tell you an exact time, not an exact time, but a ballpark. Like, oh, this piercing is going to take 3 to 6 months to heal. So 6 months, it's for sure healed. Not necessarily. If you're irritating your piercing, if you're not taking care of it properly, environment has a lot to do with it, the quality of jewelry. So there's a lot of factors which can take longer or less for piercings to heal up. Now, technically, when your piercing's all the way healed up, you're not going to feel it. You're going to forget about it. You're not going to have the crusties on there. And it's just like, it's like a bruise. Once your bruise is gone, you don't necessarily know it's gone. You just kind of forget it's there. And that's pretty much the best time to know when it's healed. Your piercer will give you a window, but it's not an exact window. Now, the other thing I want to say real quick about all you who are asking questions, make sure to ask very specific questions and be detailed if you can, just so we know how to answer the best of our ability. So, Jared.
All right. So first of all, just a comment. Amber Rose got that Mederma scar tissue reducer that you recommended and is already seeing results only 1 week later. So thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Like I said, when I had mine done on my ears, I saw a noticeable difference within a week too. I love this stuff. I love Mederma. And this is a scar tissue remover getting rid of old scar tissue. Like if you retired a piercing, you still have a little discoloration, hard tissue, this stuff works. Mederma.
All right. A question from Ella. How many ear piercings would you suggest getting in one ear at one time?
Generally, I tell people I don't like to have more than 5 piercings healing on a person at one point in time. Now, the thing is if you started with some earlobe piercings, they might be healed up in about 2 or 3 months, fully healed up, and then you can start moving on to the cartilage. Sometimes cartilage can take all the way up to a year to heal on average. So listen to your body, be healthy and have maybe 5 max, but anything beyond that, your immune system's going to be weakened, not as strong to take care of those piercings, and you're more prone to get other things too. So that's why 5 is the max I like to have healing at once. Good question.
Archie has a question, wants to know why you use the same gauge jewelry as needle. And I think the question is because some piercers would say that they want to pierce with one size and then use jewelry one size larger for the pressure that causes, right?
Correct. There's 2 different ways I would be answering this. Number 1 is I use internally threaded jewelry, which means there's no threads, barbs, files basically on the outside of the jewelry like externally threaded is. Now, if I use the exact same size external and I put that right up to that exact same gauge, the file's going to scratch and tear. So if you go bigger, it fits inside there. So therefore, it's not irritating as much. Now, I don't condone doing this and making externally threaded jewelry acceptable because when you have to take it out, it's still going to scratch on its way back out. So that's one reason why I use the same size is because it fits perfectly. Number 2, a lot of people will say they'll pierce a half gauge larger on cartilage piercings because it gives a little bit extra room for that fistula or that tube of scar tissue to grow and allow it to heal up. I pierce the same size. I feel it heals the exact same way and it doesn't cause any extra trauma for this reason. If you pierce at a larger size, once everything you put the jewelry in there, it's going to close up on that size anyways. So it's pretty much the same thing. So that's why I stick to same size, and that also minimizes a lot of the bleeding.
So Claudia, the person, has a pretty common problem.
Okay.
If a piercing keeps getting snagged on clothing over and over again, you end up getting a bump. Is that ever going to go away, or does that mess up the angle of the piercing? Is that going to be a permanent problem? Yes,
this can totally affect the angle of the piercing and how it heals. If you don't stop catching and snagging it on things, it's never going to go away. It's going to be a consistent problem. So number 1, either downsize your jewelry or find jewelry that's less likely to get snagged on there. And number 2, be fully aware of it for the next couple months, just the next month or 2. If you don't snag it, you're going to allow your piercing to heal. So be nice to your piercing and your piercing will heal up. But it won't go away if you don't stop causing the issue.
You just got to be hyper aware when you're like taking shirts on and off and towels after showers.
It's a couple seconds, but you just have to be aware of it. The thing is we've been getting dressed our whole lives, so you don't realize how fast and stuff you just do and you take for granted. But adding a new piercing, it's like you learn real quick. You catch it once and it's like, ouch. But some people just do it just enough where it doesn't hurt that much, where they don't necessarily stop or refrain from doing it.
Amber wants to know, are septums dangerous? My piercer will do any piercing, but he refuses to do septums for some reason. Are they hard to do?
They're not dangerous to do. They're hard to do. If I had to put a technical difficulty scale out there, septums are towards the top. One of the reasons for this, say for instance, eyebrow. All I'm mainly doing is kind of getting my one angle like this and it's set up. Now a septum piercing hangs freely and it needs to be level at this direction and it needs to be level at this direction. Either one of those are off, it definitely shows it. And the thing is normally like an eyebrow piercing, I'm gonna put 2 dots on you and I'm gonna connect the dots and it's easy to hit those dots. Septums, I'm sticking my fingers in there, feeling where it's at, kind of going by feel, and that's all it is. We can't see that well. So it's extremely difficult. Your piercer needs to be very knowledgeable on how to do those in order to perform a proper piercing. So some piercers just say, I'm not interested. I'm not doing them.
I mean, because what's the procedure? Like, say if a piercer tries and then it's super crooked and everyone notices, like, do they just have to take it back out and refund the money, or do they try again? Like,
some piercers will refund the money. Some piercers will redo it on the spot. Some piercers say come back in a week or a month and we can redo it then. I personally will redo it on the spot. Generally, the sweet spot's a large enough area. I might go just a smidgen forward, smidgen back, and find it and adjust it accordingly. Now, if I did something wrong, I know exactly where it is. And like I was saying, I can't really see the dots, but sometimes if you can see that little scar, and I can adjust accordingly to make it absolutely perfect if I were to do something like that. So
that's when it just is technically difficult, and if they don't get it right, it's just a big problem that they have to deal with then.
100%.
So that makes sense why it might just say no, thanks.
It's a tough piercing to do. I mean, I've been doing this since 1994, and sometimes it does happen. Sometimes a crooked, we are human, you know. We do our best to get them straight most of the time, but once in a blue moon, things happen, so.
All right. Denise just got their nostril pierced, and the winter allergies are kicking in. So there's excess runny nose type action. Is that a concern? Like, what's the best way to worry about that and not try to catch that nostril a lot?
One of the big things is blowing your nose, constantly like touching your nose. You might be irritating the piercing. And the other thing is crusties and snot and whatnot might adhere a little bit more to your jewelry. So if you have threadless jewelry, there's a little bit smaller disc on there and it's less likely of things to get stuck to. If you have a nostril screw where you have the big piece of metal in there, crusties and boogers are going to stick to there quite a bit more. So keep it clean.
Amber wants to know, how long should lymph fluid come out of nipple piercings? There's no pain or anything, but 3 weeks later when you clean it, a little bit of fluid's leaking out. Is that normal?
Totally normal. Totally normal. Nipple piercings typically are healed up in like 3 to 6 months, but you see crusties for probably a year, 2 years. I've even had customers say they're getting close to 3 years and they still have a little tiny bit of crusty still coming out of there. So totally normal.
Just going to happen.
Yep.
All right. Faith had their lobes pierced in October and they're still sore and irritated. They're doing sea salt soaks, but they're still irritated. What do you recommend?
Okay. If you're doing sea salt soaks, maybe change over to a wound wash spray to make sure it is exactly perfect. Sea salt soaks is the old school version of the new wound wash. Wound wash is pre-mixed, pre-sterilized in a can, so it can't be contaminated. With wound wash spray, you just spray directly on your piercings and like take a little piece of gauze or paper towel to wipe off crusties. If you're not mixing your salt water properly, which chances are you probably aren't because we all get lazy and mix it a little bit too strong, that will cause more problems. Also, if it's not distilled or filtered water, and also if it's iodized sea salt, because you need to be using non-iodized fine-grained sea salt. So it's a very tough thing to do exactly perfect. So just switch to the wound wash and that'll probably help. And if not, maybe check into some better quality jewelry if you don't have quality jewelry in there.
Anonymous would like to know if you have any advice for immunocompromised people getting pierced, like any special precautions they can take other than just making sure that high quality jewelry and that it's done in a safe and sterile environment.
You should talk to your doctor about this one. I've had several clients come in who say they've talked to their doctor and they've been put on antibiotics beforehand to help boost their immune system. And a lot of times that's how they have to do this. They switch their medication for a week beforehand or whatever, or get on the antibiotics in order to allow them to get the piercing. So generally, if you talk to your doctor and this is something you know about, there is something, but it's out of my control. So talk to your doctor and see what they say about it.
So there may be a specific change or something that they can do on that end.
Correct. And something else to keep in mind is like cartilage piercings are going to take way longer than like maybe an earlobe piercing or a nostril piercing or an eyebrow piercing. So certain piercings will heal faster and a little easier than others.
Joanna sends greetings from Poland.
Awesome.
And
hi, Joanna from Poland.
And is a viewer of the Q&As. And since the first Q&A she saw has gotten a helix and a double conch and everything's healing well.
Congratulations. That's super exciting to hear.
All right. Another question. Hi to both of us, and they love the channel.
Thank you very much, and thanks for watching.
Demesis was wondering, how should I be using some sort of oil during stretching the earlobes? They're new to the stretching thing. Does it have to be lubed up or anything when you do the stretch?
So Jared and I are actually talking about making a stretching series, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks that will be released and we can kind of get started on that. But you do need to use some sort of lubricant when you're actually doing the stretch. Now, personally, when I'm doing a stretch, like if I'm stretching something, I'm going to do it in the shower. The hot water is going to soften tissues up. You're allowed to stretch a little bit easier. Sometimes you can use a soap. Sometimes you can use a water-based lubricant, but things should slide fairly easily. And when you're doing a stretch, like earlobes generally shouldn't hurt. So it should almost just fall right into place. And once you start getting to larger sizes, you're definitely going to want to probably go into a piercer because some of the jumps from like 4 to 2 to 0 can mathematically start getting bigger than some of the other jumps. So nice, easy stretch, 1.5 to 2 months between each stretch. And if it hurts, back off until it doesn't hurt.
Now, just to clarify, they ask some kind of oil. What are your thoughts on like tea tree oil or essential oils or like healing oils and these kinds of things? Should I be doing that?
No, you want to stay away from most essential oils and things like that. They're not designed to go inside the body. Even though you're going to hear all over the internet, everyone uses tea tree oil and these other things. I personally see more problems from these than they actually help. And then the other thing to keep in mind is only your body heals things. These oils, chemicals, and drugs don't do anything for you other than help get rid of a problem if there is a source of a problem. So use just a normal water-based lubricant, something that's not going to cause problems, and it makes the stretch go in nice and easy. Sometimes just water alone is enough.
Just a little soften things up a bit.
Yeah.
Ultimate Sky was planning to get a tongue piercing, but is worried about the aftercare. So what's the aftercare with a tongue piercing? Is it the same as everything else, the wound wash spray sprayed on there?
No, we generally don't use the wound wash spray inside the oral piercings. I suppose you can, but you don't want to be swallowing this. What I generally tell people is to use a mouthwash, alcohol-free mouthwash several times a day. And this is going to help keep things clean. And then you also need to try to keep the swelling down as much as possible. Ibuprofen, Aleve, Advil, cold things like that can help a ton. But the big thing is just to minimize the junk food, minimize smoking, no drinking alcohol for at least a week and a half, because I've seen a lot of damage from that as well.
All right. We have a request for merch. People want shirts, more cake shirts, and then other types of things. So we're going to get on that. That is actually something we are working on that we're coming to a head on.
Yes.
Raccoonator wants to know, after how many days can I change an earlobe piercing? So I suppose they mean a fresh piercing, change to new jewelry. How long are we waiting?
The question should be, how many weeks should I be waiting? And generally, you want to wait 6 to 8 weeks minimum before you actually change your jewelry. If it's sore, irritated, you still have a lot of crusties, don't change your jewelry. We put in initial starter jewelry that is meant for the whole healing process. Once it's healed and it's done, you'll know, because you won't have the crusties and you don't even know it's there. So that's the amount of time, 6 to 8 weeks for earlobes.
Now, I'm not sure it's appropriate right now, but I don't want to skip the question. Bong Pranks wants you to take out your nose tunnel and let them see that.
Yeah, why not? I suppose I can kind of excuse it. I got a little O-ring on the inside here, a little clear O-ring.
There it is.
Yeah, so 7/16. about 11 millimeters.
And how long did that take from beginning to the current size?
Quite a while. I pierced initially at 8 gauge and got them stretched up to 7/16 after about 10 years. It's tough to talk when my fingers are in my
Oh,
mouth.
I understand. These things take time. All right. We have a question from Shane. Is Painful Pleasures a good site to get PA jewelry? Because it seems like at those larger gauges that might be harder to find.
Painful Pleasures can be a good resource and be a good site, but I've also seen some sketchy things as well. So you got to be picky and choosy. Now, as far as like really unique PA jewelry, like PA ones and things like that, that might be an area you can go to get something like that. I really don't have another source for those types of jewelry other than individual custom makers who I don't even know anyone. So for something like that, that might be a good source. But if you're looking for just a good quality, like circular barbell or, some curved barbell, you want to go with a quality name brand stuff. You want something comfortable in that area because anything that's not going to have a high polish is going to scratch, irritate, and that's not an area you want to irritate and scratch.
That makes a lot of sense.
Generally, I don't know.
All right. Casket BMX says, hey, y'all, I got a question for Scott about stretching nostrils.
Sure.
Is it easier / better to go to a piercer to get them stretched, or should I just go get a pack of tapers and plugs and use some jojoba oil?
The best answer is find a friend who works at a machine shop who can make you multiple sizes between each stretch, because it's a long procedure to kind of get these stretched up. Once you start getting to the 4 gauge, 2 gauge, 0 gauge, like trying to jump to that next size is almost impossible. I had a friend who made sizes in between. At times I got like antler and I was like carving my own plugs. You have to kind of get creative, but a normal taper set is not the answer. You need to have in between pieces of jewelry
That you wear for a long time
Yes.
to slowly do that.
Probably like 3-4 months between each stretch too. It takes a while. Like when I stretch my nostril, even those micro stretches that I did, even a yawn would make me tear up for a good week afterwards because it was so tight and so tender.
Wow. So Joel wants to say hello. Got motivated to get my nose pierced this weekend. Love your channel.
Congratulations and thanks for watching my channel.
He's actually planning on going all the way for the mantis piercings eventually. So
Awesome.
nice.
I need some too. Yeah. I need more. I don't have enough nose jewelry.
Brianna has a question. Would you trust a piercer who's inside a tattoo studio with no jewelry options other than for navel, no cleaning supplies for purchase for the piercings? Like, is that an indicator that things are bad if there's no options and no aftercare for sale?
Generally, but it kind of depends on the piercer. I mean, sometimes if a piercer moved new to an area, it can be a good quality piercer in a starter shop trying to develop a new name again. So look into the piercer and see if they have a portfolio, see what that stuff looks like. And but in general, if there's no options
and no aftercare, I feel like you should at least have available some kind of aftercare.
It's nice. Most quality shops will have some form of aftercare. I mean, like I've seen some shops say, well, across the streets is a Walgreens, you can just go get it. But trying to find the right style and the right brand, it's like people come back with the wrong stuff all the time. So
right. Why
most
send them?
piercers probably have the right stuff. So yeah, maybe look and see if there's someone else. But like I said, look into the piercer themselves and see what their portfolio is.
Because sometimes they're just in somebody else's shop and they're limited by like what they purchase and
I'm
stuff.
not proud of it, but I've been at like lower end shops before for a little while and had to build my name up. When I came to Vegas, no one knew who I was here and no one, so I just had to get my foot in the door.
Right. So you might be at something that's not necessarily up to your standard for a while until you can get there.
Correct.
All right. So the spicy cowboy says, I got my septum pierced a month ago and I think it might be infected as it hurts when I touch my nose and has crusties often. I just clean it with water for now. Is there anything different I should do?
I would say try the wound wash spray, what we've been talking about, if you haven't done that already. Sometimes if it's extra irritated, extra sore, get the jewelry where you can flip it up inside your nose so it doesn't move around. I don't know if you have a captive bead in there, but if you have a circular barbell, the one with the 2 beads on there, you can actually get that adjusted so it flips up, or put a retainer in there and just leave it be. That's going to be your best answer. Keep your hands off of it and stop that jewelry from rotating inside.
Margot says, do you know if getting a nose piercing will affect nose bleeding? I get a lot of nosebleeds and it takes a while to stop, but I really want the nose piercing. Do you know if I can?
Technically, it could. It kind of depends on where it is, like where you get your nosebleeds. And Jared, do you know much about nosebleeds? Like, are they mainly higher up?
I know when you're supposed to pinch your nose, you're supposed to pinch it as high as possible. So it seems like as long as your piercings were below the area where you pinched.
Isn't that where like vessels are close to the skin too?
Yes.
So like if we pierce like a high nostril, you might nick that area. You might be more prone to nosebleeds.
Yeah, I wouldn't do high nostrils probably
Yeah.
because that would interfere with your ability to
But
pinch
regular
your nose.
nostrils really shouldn't, other than the fact that if you're using the saline wound wash, if it was drying your skin out.
Okay.
That might cause more nosebleeds. Then I would say it's a seasonal thing and you should get it during the season where you're less prone to nosebleeds. Then you should be totally fine once you're healed up though.
All right.
Good question.
All right. New question. It's been a little over a month since I got my belly button pierced and it still gets crusty, but I discovered a lump right behind the jewel in the belly button, like on the bottom. It doesn't hurt. Should I be worried?
Not yet. No. A lot of people are wearing higher waisted pants these days. And if it's your pants are rubbing right up against it, it can cause irritation bumps and just extra irritation. So be careful of the pants you're wearing. Continue cleaning it. There's no way you can be healed in a month. Navels generally take 3 to 6 months minimum before they can be healed up. So keep cleaning it and it'll probably go away if it was bumped and irritated. So, but keep an eye on it, but it should be better.
Trisha wants to know if you have any tips on how to get started with a piercing apprenticeship.
I wish I had some good solid advice other than being persistent, find a piercer you like and talk to them, see what they require. You got to do your homework, find a piercer. That's what it is. Do your homework, find a good piercer and be persistent. Don't be annoying, you know.
But persistence is good. Like show that you want it.
Yep.
All right. A question from Ayla. I got my Rook pierced over a year ago. Unfortunately, my gold curved barbell is slowly rejecting. I'm not sure what to do. Ayla's piercer told her that it should stop, but it's been over a year now and it's slowly working its way out, apparently.
If your Rook is rejecting out, that means it was pierced shallow or at a slightly different angle, or it got irritated enough where the body just pushed out. I've never seen one really reject all the way out unless it was too shallow. So if it's rejecting, take it out and start over. That sucks. But yeah, sometimes you can totally restart over. If it rejects all the way out, it's probably going to reject out every single time. So take it out now. That'd be the best bet.
We get a lot of questions from people who want to stretch their ears up, but here's an interesting counterpoint from Amber Rodriguez.
Sure.
Saying stretching your ears is the most expensive piercing you can get. I got mine sewed up and $1,100 later, they look normal again. So just pointing out that if at some point in your future you do want to be rid of your stretched lobes, that there will be a price tag attached to that.
Yes and no. There is the point of no return where I tell people past 00 is the point of no return where they're not going to close up to a normal earlobe piercing. So if you don't mind just, a little dot there, you can slowly spend your time year and a half getting up to a 000 and it will close back up.
Okay.
Most of the time it's going to be closing back up to normal. Maybe not 100%, but pretty close. Past that is when they start staying open. That's when you need to talk to a plastic surgeon. The average price I hear from most people is $750 per earlobe. So that's about on point. Now, the part I was giggling in my head is like the most expensive piercing. Of course, like you get plugs, you can buy so many sets of plugs. That's where all my money goes, is in these plugs, these gold plugs. Yeah, you're right. It can get expensive. Be smart about it and think about it. Like if you're going to close them up, don't go that big, or plan on that money.
Right. Just know that that's a possibility when you're
absolutely
planning for your
good point.
future.
Thanks for bringing that up. It is expensive in many ways.
All right. What is the best material for first-time stretching?
In my opinion, I would say glass. As long as you have a good quality glass that is the appropriate size and the exact size, that's a good thing to stretch with. They're very comfortable. I personally like the grooves on the back of the glass, like if you're using a plug, to keep the O-ring on there, because otherwise it seems like they're a little slippery. Sometimes if you have like little fatter earlobes, sometimes we can get plugs that are actually a little bit longer and you're not going to have that groove on there, but you can accommodate for the fatter lobes if you have those. So.
All right. Tanner says, hey, Scott.
Hi.
I really like this channel, and I've got one question. I'm going to get an industrial in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. How long do we have to wait before we go swimming? Because they've got swimming subjects in school.
Ooh. That's a tough subject because it's a minimum of 1 month, and sometimes they take longer to heal. Now, for an industrial, if you end up sleeping on it, bumping it, or irritating, it's going to take longer to heal and could be an open wound for longer. So you got to be careful about that. But a minimum of a month. And I can't imagine if you wear a swimmer's cap, putting pressure on there will cause more problems too. So I don't think a swimmer's cap would help either. So you got to be careful. All the chlorine chemicals inside a pool, hot tub, things like that, isn't necessarily going to cause an infection, but they will cause a lot of irritation and could be a lot of extra problems. So be careful. Be careful.
All right. Accidentally deleted it, but I'll ask it anyway. Sorry, Leslie. Leslie wants to know, what is the proper anatomy for mantis piercings? Is that something suitable for everyone, or is that anatomy dependent?
Generally, you want to find an area where you can go perpendicular for mantis piercings. My nose is pretty flat here on the front, so mine is really, really easy. But if you had a pointy nose, like trying to get the mantis, I'm assuming you wanted the studs to face straight forward, but we go perpendicular. So if it's real pointy, they might be pointing out like that. But as long as they're symmetrical, they're still technically mantis piercings.
So it kind of depends on the angle of your nose, because you have to go directly perpendicular.
Everyone has a different shaped nose. I kind of forced my nose to the shape of these plugs too. So
interesting. You've been planning on these mantises all along?
My whole life.
Working your way towards here. All right. Question. Got my septum done around 3 weeks ago, and I keep moving it around. Is there anything you can recommend me doing to help it not move around?
Oh, I was going to say, stop moving it around. Get a circular barbell, flip it up inside your nose, get maybe a septum retainer, like that little U, flip that inside there. That's the best thing to do, and leave it up there. I know it's fun to show off, but if it's causing problems, leave it up there until it heals, and then you'll have your whole lifetime show it off as much as you want. Get to that healing stage.
Is it possible to get a biopsy punch instead of stretching? They just want to know if that's a possibility for some piercers.
I don't offer biopsy punch because it's a body modification and it's technically illegal here in Las Vegas. Now, as far as earlobes go, even if you found someone who would be willing to do this, I personally wouldn't do it, because why would you want to remove all of that soft tissue when you can just pierce it at a large size and stretch and be, when it can be mostly closed back up? Think about this. If you wanted to close it back up again in the future, you just removed all that tissue, and now your earlobes are going to be super tiny and weird like mine. And then the other thing is, if you want to stretch, don't get rid of all the tissue you stretch with.
Because that's what's actually stretching.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, what about for like cartilage, like a nostril or a high ear?
There are people who will do that. It's a permanent procedure. If you punch your nostril, it's really not going to close up. I've seen someone punch, I think my friend Josh punched it at like a 4 gauge, and he let his close back up, and it's mostly normal, but I know it's been out for years and years and years. And I don't know if the cartilage didn't fill back in, but the skin and tissue did a little bit.
So it's a much more permanent choice.
But for cartilage, it's almost more of a easier route. But earlobes, just pierce them.
Okay. Up next.
All right.
Hi, guys. I was wondering, what do you think about sterling silver jewelry in a septum? Maybe for an extended period of time, or maybe not for an extended period of time, but just a special event.
That is exactly the key, is not extended amount of time. Sterling silver is beautiful, and as long as you don't have a reaction, go for it. But listen to your body. That's with anything here in this piercing world. Listen to your body. It'll tell you if it's bad or not. If you leave it in there a long time, it probably will tarnish, tattoo, and possibly cause irritation.
But in short bursts, not a big deal.
No, a night's totally fine.
All right. Hi, Scott. I've had my Rook for 2 years and got an infection last year, and it hasn't been the same since. It gets crusties and sore frequently. Should I just take it out and start over, or can I save it?
I would say maybe check with the jewelry. Is it a problem with the jewelry being too short or too long? If things change, sometimes you might need to adjust the jewelry so it is. What was it, Rook? No.
This was Rook, yes.
Yeah, Rook. So if it adjusted or migrated, you might need to have some different jewelry, and that might be the problem solver. Otherwise, take it out and start over if you're not happy with it.
All right, Scott, my nostril was stretched 4 millimeters a month ago from 1 millimeter. When I take out the plugs and try to put them in, it's painful and tough to do. Your opinion?
Way longer. You went from 1 millimeter to 4 millimeters in a nostril. I stretch my nostrils. I have a high threshold for pain. You went through some pain. Those are still healing. I can almost guarantee you probably ripped or tore tissue. So leave them be for several more months probably before you start changing jewelry in and out, and your nose will be a lot happier. Quality jewelry, and leave that in.
Jess just got her conch pierced about 3 weeks ago, and her piercer said that she'll switch it to a hoop at 2 months. Is that an appropriate amount of time? Do you agree?
I believe that's a little bit early. Technically, you probably could be healed at that, but I generally tell people a minimum probably 4 to 6 months for a hoop and a conch. That's some thicker cartilage. There's a little bit of blood flow going to that area, but not a ton of it. And I don't know. Listen to your body. If it's sore, swollen, irritated, putting a hoop in there will only cause more problems.
So what's the pros or cons? Like if they go too early, they're going to cause a bump and end up having an extended healing process?
You healed that tubus scar tissue through the middle there, okay, and it's straight. Now you're putting a curve through that thicker cartilage, and you're distorting that cartilage. So that's why you want to wait generally like 4 or 6 months for everything, for that tubus scar tissue to get slightly bigger, a little bit more comfortable and relaxed before you try to put a different shape in there.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And plus, when you're sleeping on it, it's a lot bigger ring. That ring is going to be twisting and contorting. The stud generally stays put. So if it's not healed, putting the ring in there is just messing up the game.
Kevin gives us a fun fact, says, don't get a job working in a freezer if you have stretched ears. Being from Minnesota, you know something about cold. Do you agree with that?
I do. Totally. You got to be careful because you can get frostbite so easily. I've seen a lot of people, because I grew up in Minnesota and I had friends who had stretched earlobes. My earlobes were really big. My earlobes were about 2.5 inches. And in the wintertime, I would take my plugs out. I would flip my ears over the top of my ears, and I'd put a stocking cap on there so it looked like I didn't have any earlobe, just kind of like the way I do now. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I'd get to a building, I'd be in for the day, I'd take my hat off, pull my ears out, put my plugs in, and I'd go on with my day. But that's how I handled it. But I could only do that because my earlobes were big enough to do that. If you have normal plugs, be careful of glass, be careful of metal plugs, because they're going to retain that cold and do a lot more damage. I found wood, bamboo way more comfortable in the wintertime if you are in those climates. Good point. Good point.
Now, I know it's technically not piercing, but what are your thoughts on body mods like a coin slot in an ear?
I think they're pretty cool. I love them. I might get some things in the future still, but I don't perform them myself, and I've never had them done.
Ray wants to know, well, first of all, hi from Sweden.
Hi, Ray from Sweden.
Is a conch industrial harder to heal or more painful than a normal cartilage industrial?
Awesome question. I personally would rather heal up a conch piercing than a normal helix piercing or normal ear rim piercing any day of the week. This piercing up here is twisting, contorting. Your ear's not as strong. It's the first part of the pillow that you're sleeping on that's hitting. There's less blood flow to that area. So the conch is going to heal up in half the time, half the pain, and it's just a much easier. It's really intimidating because it feels thicker, but I would take that any day of the week over the helix.
Nicole says, hi, Scott and Jared.
Hello, Nicole.
Nicole's going in for some new facial piercing next week on Friday. Super excited.
Cool.
What time of day do you recommend getting pierced, and how do you prepare?
Okay. I treat my piercings and tattoos kind of the same way. I will try to eat a nice big meal, get a minimum of 8 hours of sleep the night before, and I like to get pierced in the morning/afternoon. I like to get up, have a big meal, so I have all the energy and I'm ready to start my day, and that's when I have my best experiences. I don't like doing it at 8 o'clock in the morning. That's why my shop opens at 11, so 11 is about the earliest I like to ever get pierced. So that's my personal preference. By the end of the day, if you've been worn out all day, you don't have the energy, piercings can be a little bit more painful. I know people like to procrastinate because they're nervous, like, oh, let's put it off to the last minute. Just get it over with and enjoy the rest of your day.
Because otherwise you're just worrying about it all day.
All day long. All day long.
Nathalie asks, is it fine to get lobes pierced with hoops? My piercer offered it as a choice for the second and third holes, but it doesn't sound right to them. Does it sound okay to you?
I will do it. Now, as far as third holes, once you start getting up there, then you're definitely going to want to go with a stud. If you're talking like the first earlobes down here on the bottom, If they're first earlobes, start with a stud so you have a good healing experience, but you can heal them up with rings. They're really not that problem. First or second aren't that bad. They heal up in a couple weeks or a couple months, month to 2 months, and you're done. So
now
maybe a little bit longer.
Is the fact that a lobe is much softer make it like less likely to get bumps? Like you were talking earlier about making a curved thing fit into a flat spot. Is that
Correct.
less of a big deal in the lobe?
It's thin enough. And the thing is when you're looking at an earlobe, like if I was to do an earlobe piercing, it's going to be here. Now the earlobe's only so thick, but the ring is going to be going all the way around. So there's only a small amount of curve going through there, as opposed to like if you were to do a Rook, where there'd be more curve going because it's
a smaller diameter ring. Okay.
Yeah, so you're going to be starting with a slightly larger. Now the issue is the ring's going to rotate back and forth, and you can pull crusties inside. I highly encourage a stud, but I would start with a ring if someone insisted.
Excellent, but only in the lobes for the most part.
Yes.
All right. Frog in Tokyo wants to know, where are you located? They love your channel.
Thank you. I'm here in wonderful Las Vegas, Nevada. We are about 3 miles right off the strip, right off Tropicana. We're pretty easy to find, big gray building. But if you're coming in to get pierced, make sure you set up an appointment first. We definitely require appointments for piercings. But if you just wanted to come in, check out the shop, say hi, come on in.
And you can check out our website at www.piercing.vegas.
What Jared said.
All right.
Right
Next
on.
question. I made earlobes like month ago or like a month ago with a needle, and the left one hurts. Okay, so I'm having difficulty here, but it seems like this person has pierced themselves with a needle, and their left one hurts a little, and they have a ball in the lobe, and they don't know how to describe it. It's just like the skin is a little harder than usual.
Okay. First of all, you shouldn't be piercing yourself at home. It's tough to do it sterile, proper angle, and there's a lot of problems you could introduce to yourself in the long term. But anyways, if you just pierce your earlobe and you can feel a lump of tissue in the middle because you don't have jewelry in, you shouldn't be taking your jewelry out. You need to leave it in so it heals the whole time. If you're taking it out, you're causing more problems. That bump is called a fistula. That's the tubus scar tissue you're trying to heal. And again, if you're taking it in and out, you're creating excessive scar tissue on the inside. So leave it be. And again, go get pierced by a professional.
All right. Here's an interesting question. As someone that's stretching nostrils, what do I do if my 2-gauge stretch nostrils are getting more uneven over time? They were pretty even when they were pierced, but now it's getting noticeable that they're kind of migrating into different spots on the side. Any ideas?
No, I don't. That's a really good question. I can't believe we have so many stretched nostril.
Right. It does seem like a lot of people.
It's so cool.
You're a magnet for people like you.
Yeah. I don't know. Like my nostril piercings are pretty even, but when I put stuff like this in there that has a larger flare, sometimes I can see a little bit more tissue over here than on this side. So as you go bigger, you might start noticing those imperfections. If you notice it and it bothers you, maybe downsize one size and go back to the size where you're comfortable with. Chances are no one else is going to notice. It's only you.
That's the way it is with a lot of those things. You
It
see it
really
in the mirror every day.
is. You know, if everyone kept saying, Scott, do you know that one's way higher than the other? I would probably downsize because it would eventually bother me. So don't point this all out to me, people. I just jinxed myself there. Yeah.
Olivia got a nostril piercing 2 months ago, and it was fine for a while, but then we started getting bumps. We tried salt water, wound wash, saline spray, aspirin paste, salt paste, even witch hazel. We're just throwing the kitchen sink at this. Well, what do you think? Are we heading in the right direction?
Quite the chemistry experiment you got going on now. If you got a new piercing, that means it's still pretty fresh, and you need to stick to one thing, and that is just let your body heal it up on its own. You keep introducing new things, new chemicals. Your body doesn't know how to react to this. Those chemicals aren't doing what they're supposed to in the initial first place, and it's not like there's a few extra things in there you're not even supposed to be using. So just a wound wash spray, and if you got those extra irritated bumps and you can't figure out why they're there, maybe do some emu oil, and that could calm it down. That's the max I ever say. Wound wash spray, emu oil, nothing else. And stop catching towels on it. That's probably it.
All right. Kevin wants to know, back on the subject of stretched ears in the cold, what's the best remedy for getting some frostbite on your ears and then dealing with water blisters? And also wants to point out that he agrees with you on how much you can spend on plugs. Feels like he spent probably about 15 grand on plugs and tunnels in his time.
I hear you, brother. I hear you. I could have a whole nother, you should see my bathroom wall. It's got all this huge collection of plugs, and you see how often I change them. Shame on me.
But yeah, frostbite on your thin stretched earlobes.
If you have it, I don't know. The only thing I can really suggest is to massage it and keep circulation going. That's like, for mine, I had some little blowouts, and every day I took them out, I massaged them, I made sure they stayed warm, and you can't keep getting frostbite. You're going to lose them. You're going to lose the circulation, and they're going to die if you're not careful. So it's a serious thing.
A yacht has just recently gotten a septum piercing. It's 3 weeks ago now.
Congratulations.
And we're just feeling anxious that it might be infected or it will be. So we get nervous about over or under cleaning it. Like, how can we know that things are okay?
Okay. This part sucks when I say this, but stress is also a huge factor in your piercings. If you mentally psych yourself out over and over and over again, you're just kind of digging that hole. So try to relax. Your body can heal that small wound, no problem. Okay. If you're constantly touching and playing with it, that's how an infection is going to happen. So if you just focus on not touching it, clean it once a day, everything should be totally fine for you. Once a day, let your body heal it.
Makes sense, because it's actually a very small wound. You know what I mean? If you accidentally cut your hand, you wouldn't be super concerned that you're going to have a hard time healing it.
Super quick. This isn't much different. It's a small wound. Our body is capable of healing this. We just don't let it. It's the same way like placebo effect works too. Placebo is a real thing, and it can really work for people. And if you psych yourself out to the point where you get an infection, you're having problems, you might have them. So just relax. Enjoy your piercing. Easier said than done.
Gabriella is interested in getting an eyebrow piercing.
Sure.
Just a little general info about it. Do you recommend it? Is it an easy one to start with?
The only thing I'm going to say about eyebrow piercings is when you're done with your eyebrow piercing, a lot of times these leave a little bit of scars. If you don't mind a little tiny bit of scar on there, they are a great piercing. They're not very painful. I will say that the week after, there's a possibility you might have a black eye because there's a lot of capillaries in that area. So you might have a little bit of a shiner. It's a possibility. Otherwise, super awesome piercing.
Question about a face dermal from Hunter. It was placed on a spot of their cheek that kind of has crow's feet a little bit, and has had it now for 3 years, and it's kind of rejecting. Is that normal?
It's normal. The average amount of time I see for most dermals is around the 2-year mark. The less movement and irritation in an area, the better the chance for it to stay. So 3 years in that area, that's about on point.
That's about what you can expect. So do you recommend getting that taken out before letting it surface on its own, though?
Absolutely.
To minimize the scarring?
If it surfaces all the way out, you're going to have a way bigger scar. So get it taken out. You can let it heal up for maybe a month, a couple months, and you can possibly get it again if you want and have another 2-3 years if
just
that's the case.
Reinsert it. Interesting. Yep. All right. Luria is thinking about getting a vertical labret. How likely is it to get caught on during sport after it's healed? Is it better to take it out and put a Band-Aid over it, or just wear very flat jewelry?
Caught on what?
Caught like while doing sports.
Okay. The chance of most piercings getting caught with sports is pretty slim to none, but most schools and organizations have policies just for the general, what if this happens? So I remember piercing people, and they would be in track and they were just running long distance, and they had to remove their belly button piercings for them. I didn't quite understand it, but it's just, that's
but they made them
policy.
For that sport.
So the chance of things getting hit, probably not. Now, if you're playing volleyball and someone's spiking it and you have a big one on your lip, I'd be nervous about that, because if that got hit, it would split. There's reasons for certain things that should be taken out, but if it's not a physical activity, you're probably fine.
Also, combat sports. That's something I didn't really think of originally, but if you're going to do any boxing or Muay Thai or mixed martial arts,
yes,
you can't act. A lot of people don't realize that you can't just take your piercing in and out every day.
No.
That you can't just go to class every day at 3:30 and take your eyebrows out and put them back in. That will cause irritation and cause bumps and problems.
Correct. And everyone's like, I have the one friend who does this and it works for them. They're 1 out of 100. We all have that one friend who can do that. But all of us, they close up and cause irritation. just count on being one of the people where it closes up on you.
So if you are actually taking impacts in your sports, then maybe it's just not compatible with piercing. You need to kind of prioritize there.
Timing, piercing is all about timing. Find the right time in life for that piercing. Yes. How are we doing?
All right. We're doing great. We got lots and lots of questions, doing our best to power through them.
Thanks for sending all the questions. I really enjoy doing these. And you guys are all super awesome. We love you all.
All right. How long should I expect a third eye dermal to last? Could it be forever if we take really good care of it?
I can't say that it will last forever because dermal anchors are still on the newer category. The longest I've ever seen is like 9 or 10 years. I've heard people say in chats they've had theirs for 16, 17 years. They're not much older than that. So possibility it could be forever, maybe, but odds are probably not.
All right. A question touching back on something we were talking earlier with Anonymous about getting a...
I love that name.
I know. It's great. Getting an apprenticeship. At first, I didn't understand what the question referred to, but I believe it's that.
Okay.
So it seems like to get this apprenticeship, they want Anne to work 4 or 5 days a week, training and covering the front jewelry counters, cleaning, etc., from open to close, and they want her to train like that for 2 years. Is that normal, or are they trying to take advantage?
And it might be taking advantage. It's a fine line. You're paying for an apprenticeship. You're paying for a career. Like, you can make some decent money as a piercer. I mean, we're not going to get rich, but you can do decent and do well. How much do we pay for college? You know, so you're just kind of paying your dues for this person to do it. Now, if you're not getting a job afterwards, if you're not being taught things, then you're being taken advantage of. You know,
but maybe in the long run, if you're going to actually get like a career, you're going to do this for your life.
This is the shop you want to work at, and you're going to be, this is a great thing. But also keep in mind, if they're just training you and sending you out to the wild without experience, it's tough getting a job. I wouldn't bring someone on here like, I'm fresh out of an apprenticeship, hire me. I'm like, I need some experience. You still got some more training to go.
Because whoever apprenticed you should have hired you.
Yeah, they should trust you to work in their shop at that point.
Right. And so if it's coming with a job, these things, but it does seem like saying up front that it'll be a 2-year process also seems maybe a little advantagey, doesn't it? Maybe. It
depends on how much they feel it's worth and what they're offering. So,
right.
You got to weigh it out. Something's value is only what someone's willing to pay.
Right. If somebody else is willing to work and do all that work for the apprenticeship,
and if it's worth it, and you think it's worth it, go for it. If you think of taking advantage of you, look elsewhere.
Excellent advice. I got a Helix 6 or 7 months ago, and I think the bar is too thick, but I have a big piercing bump that I can't get rid of, so I can't change the jewelry. What do I do?
The piercing's too thick or too long? Does it say thick?
It says thick, but we may have meant long.
Okay. Now, some people will look at a normal earring stud with the butterfly backs and they're super thin, and they'll look at a normal cartilage and go, oh, it's much thicker. I want the thinner one. You actually don't. That kind of can cause that cheese cutter effect. The larger surface generally heals better. So if you're worried about the thickness, that's not the problem. Now, if you think the bar is too long and it's moving back and forth, that would be a problem. Then you're going to want to downsize to a shorter bar. Typically, I tell people probably around 2 months is when I like to start downsizing cartilage. If it's really irritated and sore, I make you wait longer. So it's got to be feeling and looking good too.
So we're 6 months out and we have a bump. It's still okay to change that shorter bar, even though the bump is there, just because it'll be
the longer bar is causing the problem with the bump. Absolutely, because the bump's not going to go away till you get rid of the source of the problem. If you're constantly just hitting your ear, you're wearing a helmet all day long. Yeah, that's part of it. But also the shorter bar would also help because it wouldn't be as irritating too. So
it's not
if the bar's way too long and 6 months in, shorten it up.
All right. Can you still stretch your ear to a bigger gauge, or can you still pierce your ear to a bigger gauge size if it's already pierced?
I've been asked this question several times, and it's kind of tough because the piercing needle will make a crescent incision. And so if your ear piercings are centered and you're happy with the placement, you're taking that and it's going to be going lower than that or higher than that. So if the holes aren't established in the right spot for this to work, I would say it wouldn't work. If they're perfect, it's not going to work. But if they seem too high or too low, we can shape them to make it work better in that situation.
So you'd be basically just piercing in a different spot, kind of.
Using the existing hole, but it's going to reshape the hole. and move and kind of re-angle where it's going to go. Because where the dot is, the way the bevel theory kind of works with the needle is makes the crescent and pushes up from there. So if the hole is perfectly in the center where you see like the tragus here, like if it was right there and we put the needle in there, that's the bottom of the hole and it kind of goes up from there. So if that was already perfectly centered, now it probably won't be centered. It's kind of confusing, technical stuff, but you talk to your piercer, see what they say. I will go in the same spot, but generally it's easier to just use the existing hole.
Denise got a nostril piercing 4 days ago, wants to know how long before we can downsize the stud.
You're going to want to wait probably about a month minimum. If it's causing problems or irritation, talk to your piercer. I'm not sure why you need to downsize or worry about that already, because swelling is going to fluctuate for several days yet still. So
Casket BMX wants to know, so you don't consider your stretched nose as a body mod?
They're all body modifications. It's a stretching. What I consider body mods are things like biopsy punches, removing tissue, things when you have to use a scalpel, sutures, those types of things. That's all in the body mod territory. If I'm using a piercing needle and inserting jewelry and stretching it, that's just a piercing and stretching.
Space Cat IPK says, "Hi, Scott.
Hi.
How small can you pierce a vertical labret, and will it leave a mark if you remove it at that size?"
I don't pierce anything less than a 16 gauge as far as the thickness for a vertical labret. It will leave a little bit of a scar. If the scar is something you're concerned about, you probably shouldn't get the piercing. It's minimal scar. You probably won't see it on the bottom of your lip as much because it's kind of in the shadowy area, but on the top part, you probably will see it.
Okay, Haley is thinking about getting a septum, vertical labret, and a conch next week in one sitting. Is there anything they would need to watch out for? And they've already healed multiple piercings at once, so they're not new to this game. But any advice to give?
No, I really don't have any advice. That's a good triple combo to get in one sitting. Keep in mind your lip is going to swell. It's probably going to swell crooked, but once swelling's down, it's back to normal. Get pierced with a stud in your conch. And with a septum, make sure if you can flip it up or get pierced with a retainer or circular barbell. That's my advice. Go for it. I fully support it.
Gab sends much love from North Carolina.
Hi, Gab, North Carolina.
You motivated me to get over 15 piercings, and I learned how to take care of them as well. Such a confidence booster. Thank you so much.
I love hearing that. Thank you so much. And congratulations on all your piercings. Wow.
Iram has 6 fresh cartilage piercings from 4 to 6 months old. Is it okay to change the jewelry ends of the studs to some larger end pieces? They want to have their ears all blingy for a big wedding in January.
Yeah, you should be fine. Just be careful when you're changing your jewelry out that you don't irritate your piercing. Just make sure it's fully clean, all the crusties are off, and
wash your hands.
Wash your hands. It should be totally fine. Yeah.
Excellent. Enjoy that wedding.
Yes.
How do you know if you have the appropriate anatomy for an eyebrow piercing?
Like for me, I have a lot of looser tissue. You should be able to pick up the tissue a little tiny bit. Some people have like almost that bone or the skull. It's so tight where if you don't feel like you'd have room for it to rest in there, it won't work. Now, I know some people have real tight skin, like, oh, but I can pull it away. But if it naturally rests right on the bone, it won't work.
So it's all about how stretchy and loose that skin is.
Yes,
there.
Yes.
Hello from Nate Griffiths, a fellow piercing artist from the UK.
Excellent.
Just wants to say loves your work, and he'll definitely have a stop by if he ever comes to Vegas.
Please do. I would be totally honored. I love when people stop in and say hi. It's so fun.
All right. Just love your jewelry today. Such a visually tasteful aesthetic.
Thank you very much. I love my gold.
Ethereal Goddess wants to know how long should a septum hurt after being pierced? It's been out for 2 months, but it's still sore, and I'm concerned that either the jewelry's too big and irritating it, or that the angle that it's at is irritating it.
I would have to ask you if your piercing was initially painful when you got it done. Did they hit all the cartilage? Because if they hit cartilage, it's going to take much longer for it to heal up than the initial actual septum itself. If the piercing itself was super, super easy, then I would say check into your jewelry because the jewelry could be the source of the problem. Also, it's season change too. So if you're getting a lot of extra crusties and crusties are getting pulled in, keep your jewelry clean so you don't pull the crusties in.
And she clarifies that there was a bump, but it's since gone down, and it's still a little raised, but not like crusty anymore, just white colored. So the bump is fading.
The bump is probably still there, and sometimes those bumps stay sensitive in that area. So just be patient, maybe the wound wash spray, and don't put anything else on there.
So Jane Doe wants to know, how soon can you use powder eyeshadow and makeup products if you have a new eyebrow piercing?
I always suggest you can get close, but try not to get it directly inside. And of course, listen to your body. If it gets red or sore, stop using it. Now, it is technically an open wound for at least a month. And sometimes even after a month, even though it's not an open wound, if those makeups and whatnot get inside there, they can cause irritation. So listen to your body. You can get close, but try not to get it directly inside.
Halima says hi again.
Hello.
I like to stray away from inner mouth piercings because of receding gums. I have 2 curved barbells vertically through my top lip and a vertical labret. Is it possible to do a dermal medusa?
It is possible. I don't do dermals anymore. I'm just not a fan of the dermals. They seem to reject out. I've never done a dermal in the medusa area, but I've had people ask about them before. Now, there's a lot of nerves in that area. It's probably going to be pretty sensitive. It is possible, but I personally wouldn't do it.
And not in Nevada, because it's funny. You just changed your policy. The body art code in Nevada is changing, and dermals are becoming illegal in the state across the board. So,
wow,
you got out right in time.
Good.
All right. So next we have Lucas saying, hi, Scott. I'm really sick and I have an absurd amount of mucus coming out of my nose, but I've got a septum 3 weeks ago and I'm scared this is going to affect my healing process. Will it?
Yes. It's going to slow down the healing process a little tiny bit. This is one thing I'm kind of talking about when you get like the number of piercings, because when you get a piercing, you're weakening your immune system because you're trying to heal another piercing. Sometimes we get sick from piercings. This happens
because you just kind of weaken yourself a little.
So you catch a cold. You're just a little bit more prone to it. So this is the things I'm talking about. But anyways, zinc supplements. Like if you can get multivitamins, get your vitamin C, get as healthy as you can, as fast as you can. The illness is going to slow down the healing process just overall because your immune system can't focus just on that. It's working on the illness. But as far as the crusties go, if it's constantly scratching, that will slow it down too. So keep your piercing clean, be patient, and just, get healthy.
Nicole wants to know, when you're changing your piercings at home, what do you clean the jewelry with?
Generally, I just use soap and water. Like if I take my nose plugs out, I'll just under the water, just soap and water with my hands. You don't need to use alcohol, peroxide, all those harsh chemicals. It's just going in your body. Just wipe off all the crusties and clean it off just in general before you put it away. That's all I ever use. People always think that they need to take their jewelry out and clean with alcohol and peroxide and all these. No, just regular soap and water. It's just, that's all you really need.
All right. What is the best placement for an orbital piercing?
What is
an orbital piercing?
An orbital piercing, good question.
Draw it, Scott.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I have this.
And leave him pop you up in the corner.
An orbital piercing, we're taking a side view from the ear here. Say if this is the ear, you're going to be doing where it's a ring goes in just like so. One ring through
two separate
holes.
Piercings.
So instead of having the industrial, like if you have the ear, like so, you're going to have the industrial bar going across like so. The orbital would basically be like going from here to here, where you'd have like the little bead on the front, and then the hole here, and then the hole here. So it kind of looks like an industrial, but it's going perpendicular. And when you look at the side view, just like this, that's you can see how the ring goes through both spots.
What placement do you like for that? Is that generally in the conch? Would you do that up in the helix?
If I'm to draw on the ear, say if we had like ooh, that was weird. How do we move it back up here?
Move tool.
Learn how to use these
there
things.
There it is.
There we go. So now if I was to draw the ear here again, typically for an orbital, I like to do right up in this area, right up in here, or sometimes across the flat where you would actually have the traditional industrial piercing. I have done them lower in here if the area supports, And of course, if you want to keep it simple, an orbital in the earlobe is the easiest and fastest healing piercing you can possibly do as far as orbitals go. They just work really well. Sometimes existing piercings already are set at the right angle and you can use one and just add that one other one. So, yep.
Evan is thinking about going into body piercing as a profession. How do you start that process?
You got to find an apprenticeship. It's extremely difficult to find an apprenticeship, someone who will teach you the ways of the needle. Yeah. So find a good quality piercers. Apprenticeships can take anywhere from 6 months to a couple years. And find an apprenticeship where they're going to give you a job afterwards. That's going to be your best bet. Don't be set free to the wild with just a little bit of knowledge because you probably won't get a job.
Where someone just charges you money for like a training program.
They have that, but that's not a full-on apprenticeship. They should give you a job afterwards too.
All right. Hilla Elise is getting a belly button piercing next week. Tips for taking care of it. What's the basic aftercare?
The best advice I can give you right away is going to be low-rise pants so the pants aren't rubbing up against your belly button. It may not seem like it's hurting it, but it does take forever to heal. If you have lower-rise pants, you're going to be healed up in probably 3 to 6 months. If you have the high-rise pants resting right on there, 6 months to a year minimum. Use only the wound wash spray, clean around the area while you're in the shower with soap and water, and keep your hands off. Everything should be cool.
They also have a septum piercing they never changed before. Should they get that changed at the piercing shop, or is that something they can do themselves?
You can probably do it yourself if you have the right size jewelry. Just don't do it at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Give yourself time to go see your piercer if you can't find the piercing hole. That's the first time you change your septum piercing, you can't see where it's at. So it's tricky. But once you learn how to do it, it's no problem. Anyone can do it in the dark after a while.
Probably further forward than you're thinking, right?
Exactly.
If you're trying to find that
Everyone
hole.
thinks it's in the middle, but it's most of the time towards the tip of the nose, all the way up here.
So if you can't find your septum hole, it's further towards the tip, probably.
Yep.
Little tips you get here. Question. iPorcelain wants to know if it would be possible to stretch out a Prince Albert. Don't know why I want to do it. It just seems really interesting.
Yes. A lot of people do stretch out their Prince Albert. Prince Albert piercing is a penis piercing where the piercing goes in the urethra and out the bottom of the head. So you're going to wear like a circular barbell or ring or curved barbell on there. Now at larger sizes, it is more comfortable because if there's a little bit of movement, like for instance, if I were to grab one hair or a handful of hair, the handful is generally less painful than the individual hair. The thinner wire compared to the thicker wire, the thicker is more comfortable. So a lot of people like to stretch, for sure. And it's an easy one to stretch too.
Because it tends to be soft tissue.
Yeah, it just is ready to go all the time.
Gabriella, can the mask affect a nostril piercing by being in contact with it?
Now, the most problems I've seen with the mask is the ones that have like the sequins on there, or like they have like a bunch of like lattice lace on the inside so they can attach stuff. Those can get caught on there. Other than the normal paper mask, cloth masks, most of them don't get caught. My concern with a new nostril piercing is that you're using a dirty mask on an open wound. So as long as the mask is clean, you should be totally fine.
Jane Doe wants to know how long an eyebrow piercing is expected to last on average.
For my piercings, as long as they didn't reject out right away, if they reject, they generally do it within 6 months to a year. I've had mine in for years and I just took them out because I got bored with them. So you can have them. I've seen 20 plus year eyebrow piercings.
So those can be permanent. Dermals are a temporary thing, but many piercings could be permanent?
Yes.
Excellent. Hello from Pennsylvania.
Hi, Pennsylvania, the whole state.
What is the procedure for getting a surface piercing? How does that work with a surface piercing in the different locations, like the neck or the chest or near the ear?
Okay. With the surface piercing, you're going to want to be using a surface bar. I'm going to draw here again. And a surface bar is basically like so. You're going to have right angles, just like these guys right there on both sides, and that runs parallel all the way underneath the skin. Now, with a surface bar like this, you're going to basically want to be finding a spot on your body where it's doesn't have a lot of movement. So if you can take like a piece of masking tape, like put it in the cleavage area, the back of your neck, and you move your head around, move your body around, and that tape stays stationary, it's going to work really, really well. Now, another thing I want to say is a lot of times these surface bars, you want these to be round. Okay, and then the one on the bottom is going to be flat, so that this part here is round and this part here is going to sit flat, so that way it doesn't raise up on the skin and you're not going to feel it under the skin as well. So, all right.
Good advice on how those work. Evan is thinking about getting a nostril piercing. Should I worry about blackheads? I'm very prone to blackheads, and I'm worried that that might interfere with the healing process.
It depends on if you're using any specific cleaning chemicals to clean your nose for the blackheads. Sometimes certain chemicals can be irritating and cause problems, so it depends on what you're using. Generally, if you just have blackheads and it's like normal cleaning, it's not going to be a problem at all.
Now, Nightburn is going to be having surgery soon. The surgery is going to last about an hour, and they're requiring that Nightburn takes their nostril piercing out. Now, they've had it for 5 months. Do you think it's going to close up in that hour? They've heard it can happen.
Probably.
Really? It's not even just maybe, it's probably?
Probably. It happens all the time. It does 5 minutes and they can start closing on you.
Now,
and the thing is you're going to be coming out. The surgery's only an hour. How long are you going to be laying there trying to come out of the, to get the jewelry back in? Then on top of that, if you're having the surgery right in this area, all jewelry is going to need to be taken out. But they're just worried about any metal inside your body. So you probably have a glass or plastic retainer which will hold the hole open. Like I said, unless they're putting like a mask over your nose or something like that.
So it's possible they could speak to their medical professional and that they would be allowed to have a plastic retainer in there, just not metal jewelry.
Correct. Glass or plastic is generally allowed unless they're working in that specific area or if it interferes with the operation.
And that's probably their best bet to keeping the piercing is
I think the big thing is like defibrillator. When you're getting put under for anesthetics, if you have an allergic reaction, your heart stops, they use defibrillators, electricity, and if it arcs, it doesn't hit your heart. It can also burn holes where there's metal in your body, all these things on and on. But that's why I believe the glass.
The main reason they have that out. All right. What about nipple piercings? Does it have risks?
Any piercing, any wound on the body can have a risk. If anything got infected, technically you could die if you didn't take care of it. And that's just reading from a paper cut. Now, risks as far as in general, no, there's not a lot of risk. The only risk I would say is if you decide you want to start nursing, I'm not sure if male or female, but if you decide you're going to start nursing, basically you need to have the piercings for like 3 years, like 2 or 3 years. You could actually take the jewelry out, nurse, and put the jewelry back in. So that way you're not feeding any sort of infection, bacteria to the newborn. Most of the time, nipples are going to get so raw from nursing that you just take the jewelry out and leave it out. So that's the only real concern would be to what would be fed to the baby. Now, as far as like plugging glands, things like that, unless you've had your nipples pierced a ton of times, there's really not much risk.
All right. How long would a lobe piercing take to heal? I got mine pierced at an 8 gauge about 3 months ago, and it still bleeds sometimes. How worried should I be about this? Now, that's a fairly large piercing to get it pierced at an 8, right?
Yeah, that's a large size. Worried? Don't get worried. It's still fixable. It bleeds once in a while. It's just an irritant. Is that because you're wearing a ring in there, or are you wearing a stud or a plug? It could be the jewelry would be my guess, because typically those are going to be all healed up by now. Is what are you doing to this to cause that problem? Is it your aftercare product, or using just the wound wash spray? Like I said, if you're wearing an 8 gauge ring, that weight will pull down on there and possibly cause more bleeding and irritation too. So maybe change up your jewelry or your aftercare. Look into that.
Sarah Lancaster says, hi, Scott from France.
Hi, Sarah from France.
I got a doff 4 weeks ago and a flat 10 days ago in the same ear. Everything's healing well. How long before I can get an antitragus in that same ear?
A doff and you could, as long as the swelling's not too bad in that area and the piercer doesn't have to put pressure on either of those piercings, you could probably get it right away. If you're already not sleeping on that side and you can still heal it up, it still falls within like the 5 piercing category. Now the antitragus takes a long time to heal. Expect probably a year before it's completely healed. 6 months to 12 is the average, but it's a long heal. So I'd say go for it right away.
Zoe says, hello.
Hi.
Getting snake bites tomorrow, but 9 days after that, I'm flying to the UK. Can I downsize my jewelry in 9 days?
It's a little bit early, especially if you're flying, because the altitude can cause extra pressure on there and so forth. That's a tough call. You're going to have to, generally I tell people a minimum of about a month before you can downsize. So you might have some antennas out of there. You could downsize, but if you overswell, the disc is going to get pulled into your lip and the skin's going to grow over the top. And then it's a trip to the doctor to have it cut out. That's my concern. You could downsize and be totally fine, but it's early. It's early. That's where I stand on that. It's early.
All right. Chicken said, in a previous live, I asked about spiral stretching in ears, and you said it isn't really good to do. How come people stretch their septums with pinchers? Is that bad too, since it's a cone shape?
No, I don't think people necessarily stretch their nose with pinchers. They wear the pinchers as that piece of jewelry. Septum pinchers are so small. Like if I bought a 10 gauge and I was at a 14, I couldn't put a pincher in and stop. It's unless you just kind of ripped your way all the way through there, which is doing the damage anyways. But it's not like the big spirals you wear in your ears where people can turn a little bit as the day goes on. It's too small for the septum. So if you're going one size, you can use it as that taper to kind of get up to that size. But in general, one stretch at a time. And that's why those big spirals cause problems, is they stretch multiple sizes.
They encourage you to go too far.
Yes.
Racer wants to know if it's normal that their septum healed in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Good for you. You took care of it. It was pierced properly. It probably isn't technically all the way healed up because you're healing that fistula, but it sounds like you're pretty much there. So yeah. Good for you. That's awesome.
K-Ben asks, is sterling silver a bad metal for piercings once everything's all healed? I'm waiting on my septum to heal, and I have lots of jewelry on Etsy saved, but most of it's made of sterling silver. Love your videos.
Thank you for watching. Sterling silver is a beautiful metal, but it's going to tarnish really, really fast. And that's going to create an oxidation layer, which is going to be black, which will seep into your skin and eventually tattoo your skin. And you have to get tattoo removal to remove these dark blemishes inside the skin. Sterling silver is great for rings and necklaces or temporary fixes. Like if you want to wear a sterling silver ring one night or 2 nights and then take it out, you're probably okay. But if you leave it in long term, it will do damage.
And even like taking it out regularly to clean it, you're just going to irritate the piercing. So so you couldn't even have something where like, okay, well, every other day I'm going to scrub this up and then put it back in, because you're going to just probably cause problems, right?
Correct. Exactly. And here's the thing, like a lot of people don't realize this, but silver is kind of dangerous introduced to the bloodstream. So open wounds with silver in there create something called silver salts, which is like toxic to the body. I have to do a little bit more homework on this, but I know it's very dangerous. So that's why we can't pierce with sterling silver. So it's safe for a healed piercing. But if your piercing's irritated, it's going to cause a lot of problems.
It's open again then.
Yeah.
K-Dub wants to know, what's the best way to clean a doth piercing, and be detailed?
The best way to clean a doth piercing is with a wound wash spray. A wound wash spray is sterile saline solution, H2 Ocean, Neomed. There's a couple different brands. Sorry, there was someone at my door for a second. It kind of distracted me. But anyways, what you're going to do is you're going to take this wound wash spray and you're going to spray it directly on your doth 2 to 3 inches away. Let the solution sit on there maybe a minute or a couple minutes to where the crusties, dried lymph fluids and such are so soft, you can take a piece of gauze, roll it up into a point, or a paper towel and roll it to a point and wipe off those crusties. And then try to leave it be. Don't spin or rotate it. Don't put any other chemicals on there. You don't want soap in there, peroxide, rubbing alcohol. They all cause problems. Also, if you're using earbuds, stethoscopes, anything that goes in your ear, that will cause irritation and almost double the healing process. So be careful of what you're putting in your ear. Once a day, and that's it.
And Anne actually comments something super important to realize, which is that Etsy jewelry is very buyer beware. She had a bad experience last month where the metal wasn't what they said it was and caused major irritation and a piercing. So that is the problem with Etsy, is you're buying from just a random stranger and they could be lying to you.
100%. Same thing with Amazon, same thing with eBay, same thing with a lot of these places. Like there is good stuff and there's also bad stuff. So when you hear people say buy from a reputable piercer or buy from a reputable shop, that's what we're talking about. Some people by the seat of their pants open up a site and put on random jewelry and claim it as one thing, and then they don't see the repercussions of the damage it's doing to the people.
Right. They never even notice.
They're creating pretty jewelry and they don't even realize they're doing damage to people.
They're
That's
making
the sad
people
part.
sick. That's terrible.
These reputable companies, we get mil-spec sheets which say exactly what the metals are and make sure everything is what it is.
Yen wants to know how likely it is to get scarring from a lip piercing.
Medium. You're going to have a small little wound. If you look at my lips, you can kind of see a little tiny dot here. I don't know if you can kind of zoom in. I had mine up to like a 10 or an 8 gauge or something like that. So it was stretched. So it's a little bit of a scar. You can also see my eyebrows have been pierced at 14 gauge multiple times. You can see little tiny marks in there as well. These are the types of things you should expect when you get pierced. So you're not, I mean, some people don't scar at all, but expect at least something small like that.
Husan here says, I live in Syria and there is 0 piercers to learn from. So how should I start my piercing career in that case?
It's a tricky question. Now, I don't condone home piercings. My apprenticeship was terrible. I had like 2 or 3 days. They set me free in the wild. I had to learn a lot of things on my own. But once I started piercing that way, I started seeking out, like here in America, we have different piercing seminars like the Fakir Intensives. There was the Gauntlet that's not there anymore. There's other types of classes and things you can take. Coming out to the APP seminars, I know they have them in Europe as well, where you can take classes and seminars from other professionals. It's not ideal, but if you don't have a source where someone can teach you, you got to just start somewhere. I don't know what to say. Do your best as far as getting online classes.
Educate yourself as best you can.
As best you can.
Sterile technique, anatomy.
Correct. Yeah. Aseptic technique. Look at these different things. If you do a lot of research, and there are people who teach things online within reason, and you're just going to have to experiment. I hate saying it that way, but if you're in that situation, if there's really no one.
Right. Because if there's no one to learn from, there's a good chance there's probably not laws in your area about it either.
Correct.
So.
Correct. Be safe about it. Don't be stupid. You're going to have to go through anatomy books. You're going to have to make sure, map everything out. That's what I did. If I didn't know, I had a full-on Gray's Anatomy book. I'm looking at every single thing in the tongue. What can I hit? What can I do? Was there nerves in this area? I had to do research.
I mean, caring enough to do that kind of research shows the type of piercer you are.
Well, thank you. All right.
Good
luck to you. I wish I could help.
Priya got a septum piercing done 3 weeks ago, but there's a scab on one side. I don't know if it's a scab, but it's like hard skin. Is this normal? How do I get rid of it?
Just continue cleaning your piercing. Be patient. Sometimes you get crusties that are actually stuck to the skin, and they're really tough to get off there. It just might be excessive scarring too. So just keep cleaning it. Be patient. It should probably get better with time.
All right. Mariachi got a conch piercing 6 months ago. Things were going really well for the first 4 months. And then 2 months ago, it started to swell up and get a bump. If the problem is irritation because the bar is too long, can we get that bar downsized even though the ear is still swollen right now?
Yes. You got to find the right time. If your ear is so swollen and irritated right now where you can barely touch it, you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. Go in on the good day. Get it downsized, and you're probably going to need to get it downsized again in the future if it's already swollen. But if it's swollen and you're not even close to filling that bar, get it to the point where it is comfortable, and that will make it better. And then downsize again in the future once that swelling's gone down again. It sucks, but sometimes that's what we got to do.
RC wants a recommendation. We've got a lobe and a rook. What's a good third piercing for the ear?
The septum.
This guy, he's checking to see if you're listening.
I would have to see your ear. Submit a picture to the What Should I Get Pierced series and keep watching, and eventually we'll get those pictures up. We're trying to get through them as much as we can, but without seeing an ear, I can't really recommend anything. I could always say probably a second lobe or a cartilage, normal helix piercing, maybe a conch.
So Noah wants to know if stretching from a 14 to a 10 is okay.
Maybe. It depends, because if you've been wearing a 14 gauge in your earlobe for a long time and you pull down and you can see light through there, and if you go to a 12, you didn't feel anything, and then you go to a 10 and it's just a little bit tight, you didn't do damage and you're fine. But if you've only stretched to that size maybe a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, only go to the one size.
And Olivia is just confirming. So if we have a piercing bump and the wound wash spray isn't helping, the emu oil is probably our next best choice.
Yes, but be aware of your surroundings, what you're doing, which would cause that bump. Is it crusties that are getting pulled inside? Is it from movement and touching it? These are all factors. Just try to figure out what's causing the bump, and that'll help get rid of it. But flip it up if you can. That'll minimize movement and also speed up the healing process.
Natasha says, hi, Scott. Love your channel.
Hi, Natasha.
I've had my nostril pierced for almost half a year now, and there's a tiny bump on it, but it's not painful or anything. Could it be rejecting?
No. I seriously doubt it's rejecting unless your nostrils pierce so low where it's not even going through the cartilage. Normally, nostril piercings might migrate a little tiny bit and change angles, but I've never seen one reject all the way out. So, yeah, just maybe shorten up the jewelry. If you have a ring in there, go to the stud. Sometimes that'll help get rid of a bump. Yep.
Kidder Katao really wants to get a septum piercing, but we don't know what size ring to get. They've tried on the fake septum piercing with magnets, but didn't like the look, and so now they're feeling kind of discouraged on getting one at all. Do you have control over what size ring you would have?
A little bit. Now, the thing is your septum's in a very specific spot, and we're going to pierce in the same spot. Every piercer should be like finding that spot and going in that one spot. That's where the septum's at. And that determines what size ring you're going to be able to wear. We're not going to force it up into the cartilage or lower into the cartilage to make the ring size work for you. Once your piercing is healed and established, you can buy different size rings. So if you want to hang down further or be nice and snug or be ornate, then you can start changing things up. And finding different jewelry is going to change everything for you. So you need to get it, heal it up, and then you can start changing things up. So don't worry about the ring size. We'll put it in the right spot for you.
Sumaya wants to get their ears pierced at an 8 gauge. Does that require a biopsy punch or just an 8 gauge needle?
I personally would be piercing at a 10 gauge needle and stretching right to the 8. I wouldn't go right to the 8 because you're going to have a little bit of excessive bleeding on that one. That's me personally. Some piercers will pierce right to an 8, put that 8 gauge plug in there, but I wouldn't use a biopsy punch. Don't remove that tissue. If you plan on going bigger in the future, don't remove the tissue that you're planning on stretching because you need that tissue to go bigger.
May has been thinking of getting a septum piercing for a while, and the parents finally allowed it.
Yay.
So how do we tell the piercer to pierce it in the right spot so that we can flip it up and hide it? Is that something they have to maybe ask the piercer for?
You shouldn't have to ask this of the piercer. The piercer is going to pierce it in the right spot. It's choosing the right jewelry so you can flip it up inside there. If you choose a solid ring, you can't flip a solid ring up there. But if you choose a circular barbell or the retainer and tell them you need, to be able to hide, they'll be able to flip that up in there for you. It works.
So it doesn't hurt to mention it to the piercer that's your plan.
Yeah.
You want to be able to flip it up and they can accommodate.
A quality piercer is going to pierce you in the right spot. It's the jewelry you choose so you can flip it up in there.
Excellent.
Yes.
Liz says that her nose is crooked inside. Can we still wear a septum piercing?
Sometimes. Now, when you say it's crooked inside, when you're looking at nostril, like if my nose is straight here and my septum part is a little crooked, sometimes we can pierce at a slightly different angle and make the ring look straight. It's far more difficult to do this way. Now, if your whole nose is crooked and that's what you're including with the septums being crooked, that's going to accentuate the nose. So it can still be done, but you might not be happy with the results.
So it can make it better or it can make it worse.
Yes.
It all depends.
Yes.
It's the art of this thing, right?
It really is.
Is it possible to stretch cartilage? I have a double helix pierced at 18 gauge on my left ear, while the rest of my piercings are 16s or 14s. And I just want the double helix to be able to fit 16 gauge jewelry as well.
Absolutely. I had this guy come in a long time ago, and he had a Rook piercing, and he had a 2 gauge ring in his Rook. And I was blown away. As a piercer, I'm like, a 2 gauge, how did you pierce it at the 2 gauge or whatever? He's like, no, I stretched it up to that size. I was just like, you can't stretch cartilage. So a week later, I found myself starting to stretch my tragus. And that's when I realized you can stretch cartilage. It stays sore for a long, long time. It's a real slow procedure and you can overdo it too. I ended up breaking my tragus. I think I've told this in other stories, but my tragus got split into 2 pieces of cartilage because I overstretched it. So it can be stretched as long as you're nice about it. Now, only going up to the 16 or 14 gauge, no problem. Just expect a tender ear for several months.
Question about the time you split your tragus. Was it like boom, split all at once with a taper in it, or was it more like it kind of happened over time?
It was the boom all at once. I had a 6 gauge, I think is when it actually broke, and I went from the back forward with a taper, and I went from the 8 to the 6, and as I got in there, I just heard a little click and a little snap, and I could totally feel everything got loose, and I could feel the difference.
And it was just loose.
So I was like, well, I just messed up. So I took all that out and put a 14 gauge ring in there, and I've only been wearing a 14 ever since.
So you just let it heal up around a 14?
I don't know if it ever healed. I was told that cartilage never really seals back together again. It's probably permanently broken.
Interesting.
Oops, I'm broken.
Hi, Scott. I've had a 14 gauge nipple rings for about 5 years. How do I go about stretching to a larger gauge? They have tapers. Is that the way to go?
You can use tapers. Sometimes the 14 gauge, like if you don't have rings in there right now, maybe put rings in there. That's going to be the easiest bet. Put some larger gauge rings so the rings can kind of flip up or down, not so they're so tight they can't move around there. And once you wear that in there for maybe a couple of weeks, a lot of times the next size will go right into place. If you put barbells in there, they don't move around as much. They're tougher to stretch. And then you probably will be needing to use the tapers. When I stretched my nipple piercings up, like I wore the rings and I waited to the right amount of time and it never really hurt to stretch my nipple piercings. I've seen other people try to stretch when they're wearing barbells and it looked like it was pretty painful. So the rings is the answer. Yep.
All right. We're going to go for about 5 more minutes here, try to get to the last of the questions we have here, but we apologize if we don't get to you. We are getting down to short time. Poofy Turtle got a septum piercing 4 days ago. How long to wait until we get a rhino piercing?
Ooh, I would wait probably 2 months. Okay, generally 6 to 8 weeks for a septum to be fully healed up. A rhino piercing is going to be swollen on that area. You want your septum comfortable and done before you even think about doing the rhino. I wouldn't want to put pressure on there, and that would just cause so much more pain on a healing septum. Fully healed is what you need.
Lolzies asks, what age do you recommend getting your first face piercing?
I'm assuming you're saying outside of the ears, the youngest age I will pierce here is going to be 16. Am I opposed to people getting pierced younger than that? No, not at all. But one thing you need to keep in mind is you have not picked what you're doing for your life. Do you want to scar up your face? How long are these piercings going to last? Is it going to interfere with your school, different activities? All these things are factors. So, the reason I don't pierce younger than 16 is paperwork reasons. As a business owner, it's really difficult to have someone have proper IDs, the parent, the child, the birth certificate, proving that who they are, and then everything being legal. I get more people getting upset with not having the proper paperwork is why I don't offer it here, but I'm not opposed to going younger.
All right. Juicy Eric is currently at 2 gauge on the lobes. What do you recommend to stretch further? For example, dead stretching by just moving up in size when it fits, or tapers? Eric feels like we've been stuck at this size for months now.
Okay. Well, the 2 gauge is like the mathematical largest jump you can go. I think it's like 4 to 2 or is it 2 to 0? But anyways, that's the biggest jump. And from here, it should be getting easier and easier. Sometimes it's a minimum of 2 months between each stretch. And if you've been stuck for only 2 months at a 2 gauge, it seems to be on track. Give it a little bit more time. And the tapers can work. Also, I suggest maybe doing this in the shower where all the hot water is going to soften tissue up. If you can't pull down on your plug and almost see that little gap or little skin on the front, you're not ready to be stretched.
All right. Now, about cleaning a doth piercing, since it's so inside your ear, is it okay to soak sterile gauze in the warm saline solutions and just kind of place it in the ear for a little bit to try to soften those crusties?
A little bit, but you're just going to have to, it's easier to squirt it directly in there. Like just let that solution sit on there because the solution is sterile. your gauze, chances are, isn't sterile. If you're buying sterile gauze every time and you want to do that and do the compress that way, go for it. But if you just put it on a normal paper towel, it's not as clean, and you're kind of defeating the purpose of putting the sterile solution on there. Sterile doesn't do anything for the cleaning. It's just not contaminating, I suppose. But you know what I'm saying? The direct spray gets a lot of the crusties off there, and once you get your aim down, it's the easier way to go about it.
And actually, I think that pretty much answers Arlene's question, which is next, which is, first of all, hi, Scott. Love your videos. Can't get enough.
Thank you. And thank you for watching.
And Arlene has a vertical labret piercing about a month ago and wants to know if it's okay to spray the saline directly on the piercing.
Yes, that's what it says right on the bottle. If you read the bottle, it does say spray by like 2 to 4 inches or 1 to 3 inches or something like that, right on the bottle, directly on the wound. That is the whole premise, is you're trying to get all the crusties, the germs, the bacteria out of there. And then once it soaks, then the crusties should just kind of wipe right off there for you. It's the easiest way to go about it.
Last week, I got my second lobe piercing, but a couple of days ago, it started itching and hurting, and the spot feels hot. Should I remove the piercing and properly sanitize the area?
No. I mean, it might be getting infected if it was dirty. So clean pillowcases, don't touch with dirty hands, don't spin or rotate it, and use that wound wash spray we're talking about. Spray directly on there and make sure you're getting all the crusties off there. If it's stingy right now, there might be crusties inside your piercing that is scratching and irritating. So do your best to get your ears super, super cleaned.
Emily wants to know, do you have to be careful eating with a new Ashley?
Yes. Any new oral piercing, there's always the risk of biting down on that metal bar and chipping and damaging your teeth. Swelling fluctuates for several days, several weeks. So one day it might be nice and flush and you eat normal. The next day your guard's down, and that's when you do the damage. That's why it's so important when your swelling goes down to shorten your jewelry to the appropriate size.
All right. And one last question before we go. Oddly, James got a septum pierced 4 weeks ago, and we're getting crusties still. Is that normal?
Totally normal. Expect crusties for maybe a couple months. The piercing generally takes 6 to 8 weeks to fully heal. Sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little less, but crusties is totally normal. Just keep them off as best you can. Now, thank you everyone for sending your questions. Another fantastic day. I love each and every one of you. Make sure to hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed so you see all future content here. And of course, keep putting holes in your body. See you all in the next video.